If you've learned anything about rhetoric before taking this course, it probably consisted of discussions about classical rhetoric, Plato, Aristotle, and Socrates. It is likely that you were not even aware that other types of rhetoric existed. This is because of the fundamental flaw in our historical records. They are lacking. It is important to note that history was written with one perspective, one experience, and one worldview in mind. Because white men were the ones that wrote our history, the history that currently exists, including the historical accounts of rhetoric, is limited and exclusive. History has left out many marginalized voices, experiences, and stories. Women's, Africans, Mesopotamians, and many other minority groups would not be included in their account of the history of rhetoric. The current historical accounts of rhetoric that exist today are incomplete. They are missing central voices, experiences, and worldviews from different cultures and women. Although many view classical rhetoric as Greco-roman or Western rhetoric, it is crucial that we steer away from this mindset. Greco-roman rhetoric is only one history of rhetoric instead of the history of rhetoric. Classical rhetoric encompasses Chinese rhetoric, Mesopotamian rhetoric, African rhetoric, and many more. We are working to correct our historical accounts to reflect this. There are so many types of rhetoric. All cultures have their own way of using language to influence and impact an audience. These other rhetorics and rhetors deserve to have a voice and a space in this history. They should be included and discussed in courses on rhetoric. It's important that we are open to expanding our view of what constitutes as rhetoric, and that we are open to learning about what other cultures' rhetoric consists of. Only then can we truly develop a broader, deeper understanding of other cultures, perspectives, and worldviews. It's important to note that in studying and learning about all these different cultural rhetorics, we are not comparing them or placing them on a hierarchical scale. One is not better than another. They are simply different and unique from one another, but all cultural practices of rhetoric are valid. I'll now give a brief overview of the different cultural rhetorics this chapter will discuss. It only makes sense to begin the chapter with Mesopotamian rhetoric. Many believe that Aristotle invented rhetoric, but that's not the case. Rhetoric was born with the Mesopotamians. Writing was also invented during this era. They valued both the written word and the spoken word. Also, there is ancient Egyptian rhetoric. The ancient Egyptians had their own rhetorical canons. Their 5 rhetorical canons included the following: silence, kairos, restraint, fluency, and truthfulness. They placed an emphasis on credibility and ethos. However, their definition of ethos is a bit different than the Greco-Roman definition. Next, this chapter will discuss Native American rhetoric. More specifically, the Pueblo Indians valued stories. They believed that stories are connected to who we are, where we come from, and how we have lived. From stories, one learns lessons, contributes their voice to the community, and strengthens the community overall. Stories, the Pueblo Indians believed, are what connects us to each other. Stories are not a rhetorical tactic in that you try to use them to persuade people combatively or argumentatively. Instead, to the Pueblo Indians, stories are a way of gently guiding one another in a certain direction. They are a prime example of invitational rhetoric. Women were also left out of the history of rhetoric, but women were great rhetors. Now women rhetoricians are doing work to reclaim that space. They are not just working to add women to history and to the canon, but instead they are questioning the status quo and making attempts to disrupt it. They are asking why we are giving so much valorization to the canon in general and proposing alternative techniques to adding women to the canon, such as remembering and gendering. Ancient China was home to many different schools of thought, and each philosopher had different ideas about what kind of communication was most important. For example, Han Fei Su was one of the founders of the philosophy of legalism, which argued that people are inherently immoral and that the government's responsibility is to make everyone do the right thing. Han Fei Su wrote The Difficulties of Persuasion, a classic example of Taoist rhetoric. He writes using metaphors, humor, and stories to prove his argument that understanding your audience's mind is the most important aspect of persuasion, especially when your audience has more power than you. Ancient Indian society also valued rhetoric and reasoning. The Nyaya Sutras, the foundational book of Nyaya Hinduism, is all about different theories of knowledge, logic, debate, and discussion in pursuit of the truth. The Nyaya Sutras name 3 types of conversation: discussion, which is a meaningful exchange between individuals with opposing beliefs in the pursuit of knowledge; wrangling, which is arguing to win and not necessarily to prove your point or to increase your knowledge; and cavil, which is arguing to attack your opponent without addressing whether either of your arguments are true. The pursuit of knowledge and the science of logic is of critical importance in many ancient Indian belief systems. And the chapter will end with Mesoamerican rhetoric, covering the flower and song and craft as embodied rhetoric. The Nahua are another indigenous culture of the Americas with a robust rhetorical philosophy. Historically, Nahuatl rhetoric was rarely recorded with ink and paper. Instead, ancient Nahua rhetoricians valued art, poetry, movement, song, and the environment as tools of rhetorical invention. The Nahua concept of inxochitl, incucatl, or flower and song asserts that the relationship between message and medium holds important spiritual and rhetorical meaning. The meaning behind what you say is influenced by where and how you say it. Nahua rhetorical invention is multimodal and embodied and often hides symbols and codes within art, poem, dances, and songs. Of course, this is not an exhaustive list of non-Western ancient rhetorics. These are just a few ways that ancient cultures practiced rhetoric. In a later chapter, we'll cover contemporary cultural rhetorics that go beyond Western rhetoric. Studying historic ancient rhetoric does matter. These topics and issues are not just a part of our history, but instead they still exist in our society. This is why we study and learn about these topics today.